This video is sponsored by Skillshare. In human societies around the world, if you pay attention, you start to realize that certain behaviors are just considered a bad look, and maybe even kinda bigoted. And often, if not usually, the reasons why these things are considered not okay is pretty obvious. Like, I think most of you probably understand why it's considered rude to use racial slurs even when you're joking, or to catcall women on the street. But I think that some other social expectations might be less clear. Now, obviously, some people seem to have completely missed the entire memo. People are still getting caught wearing blackface every year. People still touch my hair without my permission.
Stop it!
People still use the fact that they have a black friend as an excuse for why they couldn't possibly be racist. And honestly, I don't really know what we do about that. I feel like we've broadcast pretty loudly that those things are not great. Some people just walk around with blinders, I guess. But even among the people who are aware that many black people don't like those things, I wonder how many of them truly understand the concrete reasons why. In polite society, we often follow social rules without really having an objective reason to do it. It's just what you're expected to do. Like, why is it rude to wear a hat indoors? Why do people cover their mouths when they yawn? Apparently, one origin story for that one was that back in the day, people thought that covering your mouth helped prevent your soul from leaving your body. So that's fun. Of course, some people knowingly eschew common decency just to be edgy. I think sometimes people just try to be polite without really knowing why we all roll our eyes at these behaviors in the first place. Now, I could do a separate video about all the examples that I just gave, and maybe I will, but I'd like to dig a little deeper into the ever so common "but I have black friends" defense. It's one of those things that a lot of us make fun of. It's become the quintessential lazy excuse for racially insensitive behavior. But why is it a bad excuse? Hi, I'm T1J.
Follow me.
This video, like all of my videos, would not be possible without my members and patrons, including homies like William Paul Nash, Gretchen Cooley, Cameron Roberts, and James Meisler. If you'd like to support the channel, you can become a homie yourself by clicking the join button below the video or by checking out my page on Patreon. So at first glance, having black friends, or at least claiming you do, seems like a pretty good indicator that you don't hate black people. Because why would you be friends with people from a group that you don't like? But there's several issues with this whole scenario. First of all, it's clear that this phrase is used by people who have some pretty unambiguous problems with regard to race and race relations. It reminds me of the phrase, "I'm not racist, but," which is invariably followed by something actually racist. It's basically a smokescreen to distract you from the actual racism that's occurring. This happens in politics all the time. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former lawyer and advisor, once tweeted, "Just because I support Donald Trump doesn't make me a racist," followed by several pictures of him with black people, implying that the mere proximity to people of color immunizes a person from racism. For the record, I don't think that everyone who supports Donald Trump is a racist, but I also think that racist is more useful as an adjective than a noun. By the way, Michael Cohen would later go on to claim that Donald Trump is in fact a racist.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
Wrong.
proved over and over again.
Wrong.
He actually...
And I do think Trump himself has expressed racism throughout his presidency, and it's telling that many of his supporters either don't notice it or don't mind it. When this old photo, which allegedly depicts Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, surfaced. By the way, did we ever figure out whether he was the guy in blackface or the guy in the KKK outfit? I guess both are pretty bad. Anyway, he was, of course, apologetic, but he also responded in part by saying,
I have a lot of African-American friends that I went to school with, played ball with, and I suspect I've had as much exposure to people of color as anybody.
According to historians, the "I have black friends" defense was even used by slave owners to defend slavery. Sure, they're literally my property, but they're also my friends. So when so many people who are or have been so unambiguously problematic use this defense, it really makes you rethink this statement's credibility. But a lot of people, and probably most people, aren't out here wearing blackface or calling Mexicans rapists. And because of that, they assume that there's no way that they could possibly be racist. But there's an issue when you limit the definition of racism only to things like hating other races or overtly disparaging other races. And I think this short-sighted analysis of racism is a big reason why so many people never feel the need to be introspective about their own prejudices. I know that I don't hate other races, so that racism problem everyone's talking about, that has nothing to do with me. This is also probably why so many people deny that racism is such a big problem to begin with. The idea that racism died when Barack Obama became president is kind of a meme at this point, but the assertion that racism can't be a big problem in a country where a black guy can become the president is a real argument that people make. Some boomers even think that race relations was fine in the 60s and 70s. And this comes from a limited understanding of the different ways that racism can manifest itself. Now, I've already done a video going deeper into that. You can watch that if you like. But to sum it up, it is, of course, very possible to have racist attitudes or do racist actions without overtly hating or denigrating other races. Many of our prejudices and biases are subconscious and conditioned and require active effort to overcome. You may not consciously hate black men, but you might still tense up whenever one gets close to you without even thinking about it. You might get along fine with your Latin American coworker, but you keep calling them Mexican even though they've told you they're from Argentina 1,000 times. Sure, those things aren't as bad as fucking lynching, but they're still rooted in prejudice and disrespect. They're still racist. And people of color deal with these kinds of microaggressions, not to mention the ongoing systemic discrimination on a daily basis. So either not enough people truly have black friends, or the people who do have black friends haven't really learned much from them. It's probably a little bit of both. Neighborhoods and schools in America, even today, are still heavily racially segregated. So some people rarely even get the chance to have very many significant interactions with people of other races.
All my black friends have a bunch of white friends, and all my white friends have one black friend.
A recent study estimated that 75% of white Americans have 0 non-white friends. 0. And the ones that do usually only have 1 or 2. Often when people say, I have black friends, what they really mean is, I work with a black person, or the kid who bags my groceries is black. And sometimes, much like the politicians I mentioned earlier, a lot of people use these half-baked relationships to pat themselves on the back and go on about their lives without ever having to think about evolving their perspective. But of course, cities are becoming a little more diverse over time, and people do form genuine bonds with people of other races. I have white friends, but I've also had some of those friends behave in racist ways. Their association with me did not automatically purge them of their prejudices. And I think this is common for a couple of reasons. For one, white people and everyone else in America has had it drilled into our heads that whiteness is the norm or the ideal. I've gotten really into tabletop RPGs over the past couple of years, like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. And I've noticed that when people of color create human characters to roleplay, they often create white people, which is kind of odd, right? But I think it's because we've been conditioned to assume that white is the default person. So if you, a white, goes around with the idea that you're the default human, you might naturally, if subconsciously, see other people as a little inferior to you, even if you are their friend, even if you like them. You don't hate them. You don't want anything bad to happen to them. You don't outwardly think you're better than them, but you still might engage in stereotype and microaggressions. You still might treat them as a token or an other. You might think that being friends with a black person means that you now have permission to push racial boundaries or say certain words or tell certain jokes that you couldn't before. And maybe they don't say anything because they have thick skin, or they know you mean well and don't want to cause drama. You might like them very much as a person, but you might be a little less sensitive to their views and their feelings. Maybe you never care to learn much about their background or what happens in their day-to-day life when you're not around. Which kind of brings me to the next point. Now, this is starting to change for sure, but in my experience, white people really don't like talking about race. Because in the story of the history of racism, white people are kind of the villains. It's uncomfortable, I assume, because it's unfamiliar, but also because it can sound accusatory, which can either lead to guilt or defensiveness, depending on what kind of person you are. So a lot of white people simply avoid the subject. Some of them claim that they don't see color. Probably more accurate is they don't want to see color. But here's the thing, and yes, people of color are not a monolith. Different people have different views on things, different people react to things differently, different relationships work in different ways. But I'd say, at least in America, a person of color's experience specifically as a member of their racial group is a large part of their human story, and often also a large part of their identity. So if you've never talked about race with your so-called black friends, you're missing a big part of the conversation. Look, I know I clickbaited a little bit in the title, but let's think about a deeper definition of what a friend is. A close friend is someone you trust, someone you open up to, someone you can be yourself around, someone you can ask for advice or come to when you have a problem, or just vent when you're upset, someone you can have deep conversations with. If you've never had those awkward yet honest conversations about race and prejudice with your black friends, then your relationship might be a little more superficial than you think. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all have acquaintances and work friends and bar friends and stuff like that. And sometimes it's not entirely your fault. A lot of times we don't bring this up with our white friends because we know it makes them uncomfortable, if not hostile. But I just think a little bit deeper whenever you're starting to feel a little proud of yourself because you've managed to befriend some people of color. Like everything else, it's a little more complex than that. That's just me though. What do you think? Many thanks to the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative and curious types with thousands of inspiring video lessons on topics such as illustration, photography, music, marketing, and much, much more. There are classes on Skillshare for any skill level, from beginner to master, and most classes are made up of short lessons designed to fit any schedule. Skillshare is specifically curated for learning, which means that premium members get unlimited access to ad-free video lessons and class projects. And they're always launching new classes so you can take your learning adventure to new levels. I get a lot of questions from people who are just getting started being an online content creator, or maybe they've been doing it for a while, but they're trying to figure out how to reach the next level. There's a great class on Skillshare by Nathaniel Drew called Creativity Unleashed: Discover, Hone, and Share Your Voice Online, which is an excellent resource for people in those exact situations who are looking for a bit of a roadmap for navigating being a content creator. You can get access to that class and thousands more for under $10 a month, so Skillshare is pretty affordable. However, the first 1,000 of you that click my link in the description below will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. So go ahead and click the link in the description and start learning today. And remember, by supporting sponsors like Skillshare, you not only get access to a great service, but you also support me and help me take my content to the next level.